The bridge of the Aurora's light shuddered as another plasma barrage struck the failing shields. Captain Nico gripped the command console, his blue skin glistening with sweat under the emergency lighting. Status reports flooded in from every deck. Hull breaches on levels 4 through 7, life support failing in the aft sectors, and the main reactor struggling to maintain power. "Casualties?" Nico asked, his voice steady despite the chaos. Lieutenant Sora's fingers trembled as she checked her display. 217 confirmed. Captain, medical bay is overwhelmed. Outside the viewports, the Kalen homeworld hung like a jewel against the void, partially obscured by the smoke and debris of what had once been the Republic's proud defense fleet. Now, only the Aurora's light. And 3 other cruisers remained operational, desperately trying to shield their planet from the relentless Vorak assault. "Captain, incoming transmission from President Vale," Communications Officer Thalo announced. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing the worn face of President Vale, illuminated by the dim lighting of Kalen Prime's underground bunker. Her ceremonial blue robes were stained with dust and marked with small tears, a visual testament to how quickly their peaceful society had crumbled. "Captain Nico, status report," she demanded, her voice carrying the weight of 12 star systems worth of civilians. "Madam President, we're holding position, but barely," Nico replied. "The Vorak have destroyed 80% of our fleet. Aurora's light has sustained critical damage. We can't maintain this defense much longer." Vale closed her eyes briefly, composing herself. "The evacuation of the capital proceeds, but millions remain. We need more time. Time is the one thing we don't have. Madam President, the Vorak flagship has entered the system. Our sensors indicate Emperor Kane himself commands the assault." A distant explosion rocked the ship, causing the hologram to flicker. "Have any systems responded to our distress call?" Nico asked, already knowing the answer, but desperate for even a sliver of hope. "None," Vale replied, her voice hollow. "The Zenturi Confederacy claims neutrality. The Omega Coalition won't risk Vorak retaliation. We stand alone, Captain." Nico's hands balled into fists. The Kalen Republic had spent generations developing technologies for peaceful exploration, establishing trade routes, and building diplomatic relations. They had never imagined their pacifism would make them such an easy target. "There is one final option," Vale continued, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. "We've sent our distress signal beyond the established trade routes, into the restricted sectors." Nico's antennae stiffened in surprise. "Madam President, you don't mean—" "Yes, Captain. We've broadcast to Earth." A heavy silence fell between them. Earth, the isolated, primitive world whose inhabitants had such a violent history that the galactic community had established a strict non-contact policy. Humans were considered too unpredictable, too aggressive. Their solar system had been designated a restricted zone for the past century. "The Galactic Council will consider this a violation of the Treaty of Isolation," Nico said carefully. "If we survive this day, I will gladly face their censure," Vale replied with bitter determination. "Now, Captain, buy us what time you can." As the transmission ended, Nico turned to his crew. "Divert all non-essential power to shields and weapons. Prepare for evasive maneuvers. We stand for Kalen today." Deep in space, beyond the edges of the Kalen Republic, a signal traveled across the void, carrying with it the desperate plea of a dying civilization. In Earth's asteroid belt, Deep Space Monitoring Station 7 hummed with routine activity. Lieutenant Commander Wei Zhang stifled a yawn as she monitored the long-range sensors. DSMS-7 was considered a backwater assignment, watching empty space in a direction where humanity had detected no signs of extraterrestrial civilization. A sudden alert jolted her upright. The sensor array was picking up an artificial signal, embedded with complex mathematical patterns, indicating intelligent origin. "Sir," Zhang called to her commanding officer. I'm receiving what appears to be a directed transmission. Station Commander Alvarez rushed to her console, eyes widening as he reviewed the data. Origin? Approximately 32 light-years, bearing 227 Mark 15, Zhang reported. The signal contains embedded visual data. I think it's first contact, sir. Within minutes, the station's AI had processed enough of the transmission to begin displaying images. The command staff gathered around in stunned silence as they witnessed scenes of devastation, cities in flames, orbital installations shattered, and blue-skinned beings huddled in underground shelters. Interspersed were tactical displays showing the overwhelming force of the attackers and desperate pleas in an unknown language. "This isn't just first contact," Alvarez whispered. "It's a distress call." 12 hours later, the Earth Defense Council convened an emergency session beneath the Rocky Mountains. Secretary General Morgan stood at the head of the table, facing the assembled military and civilian leadership. "The translation AI has confirmed our initial assessment," she announced. "The Kalan Republic, a confederation of 12 star systems, is under attack by an expansionist empire known as the Vorak Dominion. The Kalan are facing extinction and have appealed to any civilization who can hear them for assistance." General Parker, head of Earth Defense Forces, leaned forward. "And we're certain this isn't a trap, some ploy to lure our fleet away from Earth?" "Our analysis suggests the transmission is genuine," Director Collins of Earth Intelligence replied. "The Kalan appear to be a peaceful species with limited military capabilities. They're being systematically exterminated. Even if it's genuine, this isn't our fight," Admiral Yamamoto countered. "Humanity has enough problems without involving ourselves in an interstellar war 32 light-years away." Secretary General Morgan raised her hand for silence. "I understand the caution. However, I remind this council that for decades we've prepared for potential hostile first contact. We've built warships, trained crews, and developed technologies in anticipation of having to defend Earth. Now we face a different question. Not whether we can fight, but whether we should fight. Not for ourselves, but for others." "The Kalan distress call was broadcast indiscriminately," Director Collins added. "They've revealed their location to us, but also to anyone else who might be listening. They took that risk out of desperation." "What exactly are you proposing?" General Parker asked. His eyes narrowed. "I propose we send our rapid response fleet to the Kalan homeworld," Morgan replied firmly. 12 ships, our best crews. We make a stand for a principle that advanced civilizations have a moral obligation to protect the innocent from annihilation." The debate raged for hours. Arguments about risk assessment, strategic implications, and moral duty flew across the table. Eventually, Secretary General Morgan called for a vote. Those in favor of dispatching the fleet to aid the Kalan Republic. One by one, hands raised, some quickly, others with evident reluctance. When the count was complete, the motion carried by a single vote. "The decision is made," Morgan announced. "Admiral Hayes, the UES Defiant, and her battle group will depart within 6 hours. May God have mercy on us all if we're making a mistake." Admiral Marcus Hayes stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant, Earth's most advanced warship. Through the viewports, he could see the other 11 ships of the emergency response fleet, destroyers, cruisers, and carrier vessels, each bristling with the most sophisticated weapons humanity had developed. "All ships report ready for jump, Admiral," Commander Rodriguez announced from the tactical station. Hayes nodded, aware of the historic weight of the moment. Humanity's first interstellar military action would not be in self-defense, but in the defense of strangers, aliens who had reached out in their darkest hour. Send fleet-wide," Hayes ordered. "This is Admiral Hayes. We are about to make the longest synchronized jump in human history to engage an enemy of unknown capability. Our mission is to protect the Kalan Republic from genocide. We fight, not for conquest, not for resources, but because standing aside in the face of such evil would diminish us as a species. Battle stations. Hayes out. He turned to his navigation officer. Lieutenant Kim, initiate jump sequence. Aye, sir. Jump coordinates locked. FTL drive spooling up. Jump in 3, 2, 1. The fabric of space-time folded around the 12 Earth vessels, catapulting them across 32 light-years in an instant. They emerged in the midst of chaos. The Kalen home system was a battlefield. Debris from destroyed ships drifting in silent testimony to the one-sided slaughter. In orbit around a blue-green world, massive Vorak warships methodically fired upon the surface, while smaller craft hunted down the few remaining Kalen vessels. Battle assessment, Hayes demanded, studying the tactical display. Sir, I count at least 40 Vorak warships of various classes. Commander Rodriguez reported. 4 Kalen cruisers still operational, heavily damaged. The Vorak appear to be employing directed energy weapons, plasma-based, from the emissions. Their ships are larger than ours, but seem less maneuverable. Hail the Kalen vessels, Hayes ordered. After a moment, a blue-skinned alien appeared on the main view screen. His uniform was scorched, and a wound on his forehead leaked violet blood. This is Captain Nico of the Kalen Republic vessel, Aurora's Light, he said, visible shock on his face at seeing humans. What are you? Captain Nico. I'm Admiral Marcus Hayes of the United Earthship Defiant. We received your distress call and have come to render assistance. Nico's expression shifted from shock to disbelief. You came to help us? We did. Brief me on the situation. Regaining his composure, Nico quickly outlined the strategic picture. The Vorak Dominion attacked without warning 6 days ago. Their main fleet, commanded by Emperor Kane himself, arrived yesterday. They've destroyed our orbital defenses and are systematically bombarding population centers. We estimate 5 million casualties already. And their weaknesses? Hayes pressed. Unknown. We've never managed to penetrate their shields, Nico admitted. Our weapons were designed for asteroid mining and scientific research, not war. Hayes nodded grimly. Well, Captain, humanity has had rather more practice with warfare. Stay behind us. We'll take point. Turning to his tactical officer, Hayes issued orders that would change the course of galactic history. Target the nearest Vorak patrol group. All ships, weapons free. Show them how Earth fights. Supreme General Rex stood on the command deck of the Vorak battlecruiser, Inevitable Victory, monitoring the systematic destruction of the Kalen homeworld's infrastructure. The campaign was proceeding exactly as planned, another weak civilization falling before the might of the Dominion. General, new contacts detected, his sensor officer reported suddenly. 12 vessels of unknown configuration have appeared at the system's edge. Rex frowned. Identification? Unknown, General. They match no known design in our database. Strength assessment? The officer hesitated. Difficult to determine, sir. They're smaller than our cruisers, but generating unusual energy signatures. Rex dismissed the concern with a wave. Likely reinforcements from one of the minor powers. Send Patrol Group 8 to intercept and eliminate them. Yes, General. 8 Vorak destroyers broke formation and accelerated toward the human fleet, a standard response to any minor threat. Rex had already turned his attention back to the bombardment patterns when his officer spoke again, this time with unmistakable alarm. General, the unknown vessels are accelerating at impossible speeds. Rex spun around. What? On the tactical display, the 12 Earth ships had split into 3 battle groups and were executing maneuvers that seemed to defy the laws of physics. They moved with a precision and speed that the Vorak, accustomed to fighting technologically inferior opponents, had never encountered. They're launching projectiles, the officer reported. Rex almost laughed. Projectiles? Against our shields? His amusement died as the first kinetic rounds, Tungsten rods accelerated to relativistic speeds, tore through the Vorak destroyer's energy shields as if they weren't there. Designed to repel energy weapons, the Vorak defensive systems had no effective countermeasure against solid projectiles moving at such velocities. 3 Vorak ships shattered instantly, their hulls peeled open to space. The remaining 5 attempted evasive maneuvers, but the human vessels anticipated their movements with uncanny accuracy. "General, we're receiving distress calls from Patrol Group 8, the communications officer shouted. They report being attacked with projectile weapons and nuclear-tipped missiles. Their shields are ineffective. Rex's mandibles clicked in agitation. Impossible! Recalibrate the sensors. No civilized species uses such primitive weaponry. But the evidence was undeniable. Within minutes, all 8 Vorak destroyers had been reduced to drifting wreckage. Not a single human ship had been damaged. On the inevitable victory's command deck, Supreme General Rex felt something he had not experienced in decades of conquest: uncertainty. "Contact the flagship," he ordered. "Emperor Kane must be informed. We face an unknown species with unconventional capabilities." Across the Kalan system, word spread rapidly. The surviving Kalan ships, which had been fighting a desperate delaying action, watched in astonishment as the human fleet systematically engaged and destroyed Vorak patrols. In the underground shelters of Kalan Prime, civilians gathered around communication terminals, hearing reports of mysterious saviors who had appeared from nowhere. President Vale, still in the central bunker beneath the Capitol, received the first verified transmission from Captain Nico. "Madam President, it's true," Nico said, his voice vibrant with renewed hope. "Earth responded to our call. Their ships move like nothing I've ever seen. And their weapons, they cut through Vorak shields as if they weren't there." "Earth?" one of Vale's advisors whispered. "The restricted world? The humans?" Vale nodded, a grim satisfaction in her eyes. "Yes, the species the Galactic Council feared was too warlike to join interstellar society. It seems that warlike nature may be our salvation." On the view screen, Captain Nico continued his report. "The human admiral has requested tactical data on Vorak fleet positions. They're planning a major counteroffensive." "Give them everything they need," Vale ordered. "And Captain, thank them for answering when no one else would." Aboard the UES Defiant, Admiral Hayes studied the tactical display showing the Vorak fleet's disposition. The initial skirmishes had proven what he had suspected: Earth's military technology, developed through centuries of conflict and refined through paranoid preparation for alien threats, was uniquely effective against the Vorak. "Their shields are calibrated for energy weapons," he explained to his assembled officers. "They've evolved in a galactic environment where directed energy is the standard. Our kinetic weapons bypass their defenses entirely. They're adapting, though," Commander Rodriguez pointed out. "The second patrol group tried to evade rather than directly engage. They're learning." Hayes nodded. "Which is why we need to press our advantage immediately. The Vorak command ship, this eternal conquest, remains in high orbit over Kalan Prime, coordinating their invasion. If we can cripple or destroy it, we may break their offensive entirely." "Sir, that's their largest vessel," Captain Lee of the destroyer, UES Harrier, said through the comlink. "Preliminary scans suggest it's at least 3 times the mass of the Defiant. Even with our tactical advantages, a direct assault would be costly." "Agreed," Hayes replied. "Which is why we won't attack it directly, not yet. First, we're going to destroy their supply lines and force them to commit their reserves." He outlined his strategy. The Earth fleet would split into 4 task forces. 3 would target Vorak supply ships, logistics centers, and communication relays throughout the system. The 4th, led by the Defiant, would conduct a series of hit-and-run attacks on Vorak battle groups, drawing their attention away from the Kalan homeworld. "The Kalan have provided us with detailed stellar cartography," Hayes concluded. We'll use the system's asteroid belts and radiation zones for cover. Remember, we're not just fighting to save the Kaelin. We're showing the galaxy what humanity stands for. Dismissed. As the officers filed out, Commander Rodriguez remained behind. Sir, a word? Hayes nodded. The crew is asking, what happens after this battle? If we win, what then? We've revealed ourselves to the galactic community. Hayes gazed out the viewport at the distant blue sphere of Kaelin Prime. Then we've changed the course of human history. Commander, for better or worse, Earth can no longer remain isolated. We've chosen our path. Emperor Kane's chamber, aboard the Eternal Conquest, was designed to inspire awe and fear. The vast room was lined with trophies from 100 conquered worlds, artifacts, weapons, and in some cases, preserved specimens of extinct species. The Emperor himself, his chitinous exoskeleton enhanced with cybernetic implants that gleamed in the low light, sat upon a command throne that connected directly to the ship's systems. Supreme General Rex knelt before his Emperor, head bowed. Rise, General, Kane said, his voice artificially amplified to a resonant boom. Explain this. Inconvenience. Rex stood, struggling to maintain his composure. Emperor, we face an unexpected development. A previously unknown species has entered the conflict in support of the Kaelin. And this concerns us? Why? Kane's tone was dangerously calm. They possess unusual technological capabilities. My Emperor, their weapons bypass our shields. They've destroyed 23 of our vessels in the past 6 hours alone. A ripple of movement passed through Kane's exoskeleton, the Vorak equivalent of a surprised flinch. 23? From 12 ships? Yes. Emperor. They strike without warning, using multiple attack vectors. They appear to understand our tactical doctrines and exploit them. Rex hesitated before adding, Intelligence has identified them as humans, from a world called Earth. Earth? Kane's compound eyes flashed. The isolated system? The primitives? It seems they are not as primitive as the galactic community believed, Rex admitted. Their technology is different. They employ kinetic weapons, nuclear devices, and combat maneuvers that suggest extensive experience with warfare. Emperor Kane rose from his throne, towering over his general. You speak of them with respect, Rex. Have you forgotten who we are? The Vorak Dominion has conquered 300 worlds across 17 star systems. We do not fear primitive savages, regardless of their tactics. Of course, Emperor, I merely... Double the bombardment of Kaelin Prime, Kane interrupted. Show these humans the price of interference. Deploy the main battle fleet and crush them utterly. I want their ships dissected for study, and their homeworld's coordinates extracted for our next campaign. As Rex bowed and departed, Emperor Kane returned to his throne, mandibles clicking in agitation. For the first time in his long reign, a note of uncertainty had entered his calculations. The human fighter pilots called it the Furball, a chaotic, swirling dogfight in the debris field surrounding Kaelin's third moon. Earth's carrier ship, UES Normandy, had launched its full complement of Wasp-class fighters to intercept Vorak bombing runs targeting hidden Kaelin refugee camps. Lieutenant Sofia Martinez jerked her fighter into a tight barrel roll, narrowly avoiding a plasma burst from the Vorak craft on her tail. The heads-up display tracked 5 enemy ships circling around for another pass. Talon Squadron, tighten up, she ordered through the comm. Diamond formation. Prepare for Crazy Ivan on my mark. The 12 human fighters consolidated into a tight diamond pattern, seemingly vulnerable as they flew directly toward the approaching Vorak squadron. Now! Martinez shouted. In perfect synchronization, the Earth fighters executed a maneuver that would have killed an organic pilot without advanced inertial dampening technology. Each ship flipped 180 degrees while maintaining their forward momentum, suddenly facing their pursuers while still traveling in the original direction. The Vorak pilots, unprepared for this impossibility, flew directly into a barrage of high-caliber cannon fire. 3 enemy ships erupted into fireballs immediately. The others scattered, their formation broken. "Press the advantage," Martinez ordered, flipping her fighter back around and accelerating after the disoriented Vorak ships. "Don't let them regroup!" Throughout the Kalan system, similar scenes unfolded. Human combat doctrines, developed through millennia of warfare against other humans, proved devastatingly effective against the Vorak, who had grown complacent after centuries of easy victories against less martial species. In space, near Kalan Prime's largest orbital station, the destroyer UES Sentinel engaged a Vorak cruiser twice its size. Instead of maintaining distance as Vorak tactical doctrine expected, Captain Abrams took his ship directly into point-blank range, where the enemy's plasma weapons couldn't fully deploy. The Sentinel's kinetic broadside tore through the Vorak vessel's midsection, splitting it in half. On the fringes of the system, Earth's stealth frigates, Shadow and Wraith, methodically destroyed Vorak supply vessels, targeting engines and life support rather than weapon systems. The message was clear. The humans didn't just fight differently, they thought differently about warfare itself. President Vale emerged from the underground bunker for the first time in 8 days, squinting in the sunlight that filtered through the smoke-filled atmosphere. Around her, the capital city of Kalan Prime lay in ruins, buildings shattered, parks burned to ash, bodies still being recovered from collapsed structures. Yet, there was a change in the air. The constant thunder of bombardment had ceased. The skies, though filled with smoke, no longer flashed with the light of plasma weapons. Overhead, Kalan defense ships patrolled alongside the smaller, sleeker vessels of Earth. "Madam President," Captain Nico said, approaching with a human officer beside him. "May I present Commander Rodriguez of the Earth vessel, Defiant." Vale studied the human with undisguised curiosity. So similar to her own people in basic form, yet subtly different. The pinkish skin tone, the lack of antennae, the rounded ears. "Commander," she said, inclining her head, "Kalan owes your people a debt we can never repay." Rodriguez smiled, a gesture apparently universal among humanoid species. "The battle isn't over yet, Madam President. Admiral Hayes has requested a meeting with you and your military advisors. The Vorak have pulled back to regroup, but they'll return in force." "Of course," Vale agreed. "Our tactical command center remains operational. Please, this way." As they walked through the devastated city, Vale noticed something she hadn't expected. Her people were emerging from shelters, looking upward, not in fear, but with expressions of cautious hope. Many pointed at the human officer, whispering among themselves. In the command center, Admiral Hayes waited with a holographic display of the Kalan system projected before him. He straightened as Vale entered, offering a formal bow. "Madam President, thank you for meeting with me. I'm Admiral Marcus Hayes, United Earth Defense Fleet." "Admiral Hayes," Vale acknowledged. "Your intervention has saved millions of lives already. The Kalan Republic stands in your debt." Hayes gestured to the holographic display. "The situation remains critical. We've disrupted the Vorak offensive and destroyed approximately 30% of their fleet strength in this system. However, our intelligence suggests Emperor Kane has recalled his distributed forces from across the sector. Within 24 hours, we expect to face at least 60 additional Vorak warships." Vale's antennae drooped slightly. "That would give them overwhelming numerical superiority, even with your tactical advantages." "Yes," Hayes agreed bluntly. "In a conventional engagement, we would eventually be overwhelmed. Therefore, I propose an unconventional strategy." He manipulated the holographic display, highlighting the massive Vorak flagship in orbit around Kalan Prime. "Emperor Kane commands from the Eternal Conquest. The Vorak, like many autocratic regimes, are highly centralized in their command structure. If we can eliminate Kane and his flagship, We believe the Vorak fleet will fall into disarray. A decapitation strike, one of the Kalen military advisors murmured. Exactly, Hayes confirmed. But we'll need the support of your remaining ships, and any other assets you can bring to bear. Vale studied the human admiral thoughtfully. You've already done more than anyone could have asked. Admiral, your 12 ships against an empire. Why risk everything on this final gambit? Hayes's expression hardened. Because that's who we are. Madam President, humanity has spent its history fighting itself, developing the art of war to terrible perfection. When we finally united and looked to the stars, we hoped to find peace. Instead, we found you, a peaceful people facing extinction at the hands of conquerors. If we don't stand against such evil, then all our progress, all our unity, means nothing. A silence fell over the command center. Then Vale straightened, her full presidential dignity evident despite her tattered robes. The Kalen Republic will stand with Earth. Admiral Hayes, our remaining ships are at your disposal. And... She hesitated, then continued. I've received communications from the Centauri Confederacy and the Omega Coalition. Witnessing your defense of our people has shifted their assessment of the strategic situation. They're dispatching forces to assist us. Hayes raised an eyebrow. The same powers that initially refused to help? The galaxy is watching, Admiral, Vale said simply. Your actions have changed more than just this battle. On the bridge of the Eternal Conquest, Emperor Cain received the latest battle updates with growing rage. The holographic displays showed the systematic destruction of Vorak fleet elements throughout the system. Supply lines had been severed, communication relays destroyed, and multiple battle groups ambushed and demolished. These primitives, he hissed, his exoskeleton vibrating with fury. These savages dare to challenge the Dominion? Supreme General Rex stood rigidly at attention, all too aware that messengers of bad news often became targets of the Emperor's wrath. The reinforcements from the Proxima and Rigel sectors will arrive within 6 hours. My Emperor, 63 ships, including 5 dreadnoughts. We will crush these humans and their Kalen allies. You've promised victory before, General, Cain said dangerously. Yet I watch our fleet being dismantled by 12 vessels from a backwater world. The humans employ unconventional tactics, Rex replied carefully. But we are adapting. Our shields have been recalibrated to better resist kinetic impacts. Our targeting systems now account for their evasive patterns. And, most importantly, we have numbers on our side. Cain turned to his intelligence officer. What have you learned about these humans? Where is their weakness? The intelligence officer activated a data display. They appear to be highly protective of one another. Emperor. Unlike our forces, they will break formation and expose themselves to danger to rescue damaged Allied vessels. Furthermore, our analysis of their communication patterns suggests a strong emotional component to their unit cohesion. Sentiment, Cain sneered. As I suspected, primitives who have not evolved beyond their biological imperatives. There is more, the officer continued. Intercepted communications indicate they place high value on civilian lives, both their own and the Kalens. They have diverted significant resources to evacuation and medical efforts. Emperor Cain's compound eyes gleamed with malice. Then we shall exploit this weakness. Prepare a special broadcast to all Kalen frequencies. Show them what happens to those who align themselves with Earth. In a hastily established field hospital on Kalen Prime's southern continent, Dr. Elizabeth Chen worked alongside Kalen medical personnel, treating the wounded from both species. The tent structure shook as a sonic boom rattled the air, human fighters passing overhead on patrol. Stabilize the plasma burn with the regenerative gel, she instructed a Kalen nurse, gesturing to the injured civilian on the gurney. Then apply the synthetic skin graft. It should be compatible with your physiology. The Kalen medical director, Dr. Krell approached with evident wonder. Your treatments are extraordinary. Dr. Chen, we had no effective therapy for plasma burns of this severity. Chen offered a tired smile. Humans have an unfortunate amount of experience treating weapons injuries. Some good had to come from our violent history. A commotion at the hospital entrance drew their attention. A group of Kalen children were gathered around several off-duty human crew members. One sailor was demonstrating simple card tricks, while another had produced a harmonica and was playing a gentle melody that had the young Kalen swaying in fascination. They've lost so much, Krell said quietly, watching the children. Their homes, their families in many cases. Yet your people have given them something I feared was gone forever. What's that? Chen asked. Hope, Krell replied simply. The moment was shattered by an urgent broadcast that activated on all communication devices simultaneously. Emperor Kane's insectoid face appeared, mandibles clicking in anger. People of the Kalen Republic, he began, his translated voice cold and mechanical. Your decision to align with the primitive humans has consequences. Observe. The image shifted to a real-time view of a small Kalen colony world. Hanging in orbit above it was a massive Vorak battleship, its weapons ports glowing with building energy. This is Kalen Colony Elysium. Kane's voice continued. Population, 3 million. A demonstration of the price of defiance. Horror spread through the hospital as the Vorak ship fired a concentrated plasma beam directly at the planet's surface. The feed showed the beam striking a major city, vaporizing it instantly. Secondary explosions spread outward, consuming forests, lakes, everything in a widening circle of destruction. 3 hours, Kane concluded as the feed returned to his face. You have 3 hours to surrender the human fleet. Otherwise, another colony dies, and another, until none remain. The broadcast cut off, leaving a stunned silence in its wake. Dr. Chen looked at the Kalen children, now huddled together in fear, then at her medical colleagues whose antennae had drooped in despair. She activated her communicator. This is Dr. Chen to UES Defiant. Admiral Hayes, please respond. The situation has escalated. The Joint Command Center beneath Kalen Prime's capital had become the nerve center of the Allied resistance. Representatives from Earth, Kalen, and now the newly arrived Centauri and Omega observers gathered around the strategic display. Admiral Hayes studied the real-time updates with grim determination. The Vorak reinforcements have arrived sooner than expected. 63 ships, concentrated around the Eternal Conquest. And they've already destroyed Elysium, President Vale said, her voice hollow with grief. 3 million souls, gone in an instant. A terror tactic, Ambassador Lyra of the Centauri Confederacy observed. Her silver-scaled skin reflected the blue light of the holographic display. Emperor Kane believes he can force your capitulation through civilian casualties. Which means he doesn't understand humans at all, Hayes replied, his voice hard. We don't negotiate with those who target innocence. We end them. Minister Cato of the Omega Coalition, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence, leaned forward. The Centauri have committed 12 ships to this battle. The Omega Coalition, 14. Even with your Earth vessels and the remaining Kalen Defense Force, we are outnumbered. Numbers aren't everything, Hayes said. He manipulated the display, highlighting the massive Vorak flagship. Our target remains the Eternal Conquest. Everything else is a distraction. Their defenses will be at maximum, Captain Nico pointed out. After your success against their other vessels, they'll have adapted their shields. A direct assault would be suicide. Hayes nodded. Which is why we won't attack directly. We'll use their own arrogance against them. He expanded the tactical display. The combined fleet will engage the Vorak in 3 separate battle groups. Here, here, and here. We'll make it appear that we're attempting to break through their lines to reach the colony worlds. as if we're responding to their threat by trying to protect the remaining populations. A feint, Minister Cato realized. Exactly. While their attention is focused on the main battle, a small strike force will approach from within Kalan Prime's shadow. 5 ships, 2 Earth vessels, 1 Kalan, 1 Zenturi, and 1 Omega. A united effort, symbolically and practically. Ambassador Lyra's head frills extended in concern. Even with the element of surprise, 5 ships cannot destroy the Eternal Conquest. Its shields are too powerful. We're not going to destroy it from the outside, Hayes revealed. We're going to board it. A stunned silence fell over the command center. Board the flagship of the Vorak Emperor? Captain Nico finally asked. How? Hayes gestured to Commander Rodriguez, who stepped forward with a data tablet. We've analyzed the Vorak shield configurations. They've adapted to better resist our kinetic weapons. But in doing so, they've created a vulnerability. Their shields must periodically cycle to prevent energy buildup. During that microsecond of cycling, a precisely timed projectile could penetrate. Not a weapon, Hayes continued. A delivery vehicle. Earth's special orbital forces are trained for zero-G combat and ship infiltration. Once aboard, they'll fight their way to critical systems and disable the flagship from within. This is madness. One of the Kalan advisors protested. Even if they penetrate the shields, they'd face thousands of Vorak troops. Sometimes, Hayes said quietly, madness is exactly what's needed. The Vorak expect us to fight conventionally, just with different weapons. They don't understand that humans have perfected the art of asymmetric warfare, of achieving victory against superior numbers through audacity and sacrifice. He looked around the room, meeting each gaze in turn. I'll be leading the boarding action personally. President Vale's antennae quivered in surprise. Admiral, you're the fleet commander. Your place is... My place is where I can make the most difference. Hayes interrupted gently. The fleet operations will proceed under Captain Lee's command. This mission requires someone who understands exactly what's at stake. He paused before adding, and someone the Vorak would recognize as a worthy opponent for their emperor. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, Captain Nico stepped forward. The Kalan Republic has always been a peaceful civilization. We explored, we traded, we built. We never imagined having to fight for our very existence. His posture straightened. But if we are to survive in this galaxy, perhaps we too must learn the art of sacrifice. I volunteer to join your boarding team, Admiral. Ambassador Lyra and Minister Cato exchanged glances, then both nodded. The Zenturi and Omega will each provide elite warriors for this mission, Lyra declared. If we are to forge a new alliance, let it be in fire and blood. Hayes looked to President Vale, who stood in silent contemplation. Finally, she spoke, her voice carrying the weight of her entire civilization. 3 hours until the Vorak destroy another colony. How soon can you launch this operation, Admiral? Hayes checked the chronometer on his wrist. 2 hours, 40 minutes, Madam President. Vale nodded solemnly. Then may whatever gods exist in this universe watch over you all. The vacuum of space carried no sound as the combined fleet of Earth, Kalan, Zenturi, and Omega vessels engaged the Vorak armada. Energy weapons, kinetic projectiles, and fighter craft crisscrossed the void in a deadly dance of destruction. Aboard the Eternal Conquest. Emperor Cain watched with satisfaction as his reinforced fleet held the line against the Allied forces. The tactical display showed the battle unfolding across a vast area of space, the Allies attempting to punch through at multiple points, presumably to reach the threatened colony worlds. Their strategy is transparent, he remarked to Supreme General Rex. They seek to protect the colonies before our deadline expires. Yes, Emperor, Rex agreed, though something about the enemy's approach troubled him. Their attack pattern seems dispersed, inefficient. Because they are desperate, Kane replied dismissively. The humans have inspired this futile resistance, but they cannot change the inevitable outcome. The Dominion conquers all, eventually. On another front of the battle, the Earth carrier. UES Normandy launched successive waves of fighters. Lieutenant Martinez led Talon Squadron through a debris field, engaging Vorak interceptors with practiced precision. Talon Squadron, this is Control, came the voice of the Normandy's tactical officer. Maintain aggressive posture. Draw enemy fighters away from Sector 7-9er. Copy that. Control, Martinez responded, banking her fighter into a tight turn that brought her behind a Vorak craft. She triggered her cannons, watching with satisfaction as the enemy ship disintegrated. Talons, push forward. Make them chase us. Throughout the battlefield, similar scenes unfolded. The Allied ships fought with desperate intensity, creating the impression of an all-out effort to break the Vorak line. And all the while, a small strike force, consisting of the Earth Destroyer, UES Harrier, the Stealth Frigate, UES Shadow, the Kalen Cruiser, Solace, the Zenturi vessel, Swift Vengeance, and the Omega ship, Inevitable Justice, moved silently through the shadow of Kalen Prime, approaching the Eternal Conquest from its blind side. Aboard the Shadow, Admiral Hayes addressed the assembled boarding team, 20 Earth Special Forces operators, 10 Kalen volunteers, 5 Zenturi warriors, and 5 Omega infiltrators. We have one opportunity, he told them, his voice solemn in the cramped deployment bay. One precisely timed launch window when the Eternal Conquest's shields cycle. Our boarding pods must hit within that microsecond gap, or they'll be destroyed on impact. He looked around at the diverse group, representatives of 4 different species, united in common purpose. Once aboard, we fight to the ship's reactor control room. The Eternal Conquest is powered by an antimatter reactor with inadequate containment protocols, a deliberate design choice that allows for emergency self-destruction. We're going to exploit that weakness. Captain Nico, now clad in a modified Earth combat suit, checked the unfamiliar weapon in his hands. We'll face heavy resistance. The Emperor's personal guard consists of cybernetically enhanced Vorak warriors. We need only succeed long enough to set the reactor to overload, Hayes replied. After that, he left the implication hanging. One of the Zenturi warriors, her scales gleaming under the bay lights, spoke. A suicide mission, then. Hayes nodded grimly. For those who reach the reactor, yes. But the pods can be programmed for automated return. Some may make it back. No one mentioned the obvious, that those most likely to reach the reactor were also least likely to return. 2 minutes to launch window, the ship's AI announced, boarding team to pods. As they moved to their assigned positions, Captain Nico caught Hayes' arm. Admiral, I must ask, why? Your world was safe, isolated. The Vorak had no knowledge of Earth. You could have ignored our distress call, preserved your secrecy, your safety. Hayes considered the question. Throughout human history, we've asked ourselves what makes a civilization worthy of survival. Is it technology? Art? Philosophy? He secured his helmet. We decided it's the willingness to stand against cruelty, even at great cost, even for strangers. 30 seconds to launch window, the AI intoned. Hayes entered his boarding pod, the door sealing behind him. Through the small viewport, he watched as the massive bulk of the Eternal Conquest grew larger against the starfield. The ship's surface was dotted with weapon emplacements, hangar bays, and the telltale shimmer of energy shields. Shield cycle in 3, 2, 1. The pods launched simultaneously, accelerating at tremendous speed toward the Vorak flagship. For a heart-stopping moment, Hayes thought they had missed the window. Then his pod slammed through the momentarily absent shields and impacted against the flagship's hull. Automated breaching charges detonated, cutting through the outer plating. As atmosphere vented explosively around the pod, Hayes released his safety harness and readied his weapon. The pod's door blew outward, and he emerged into the corridor of the Eternal Conquest, immediately engaging the startled Vorak crew members who had responded to the breach. Similar scenes played out across the massive ship as 40 boarding pods penetrated at different points. Alarms blared, and emergency bulkheads slammed shut. But the damage was done. The infiltration had begun. On the command deck of the Eternal Conquest, chaos erupted as reports flooded in from all sectors of the ship. Multiple hull breaches. Intruders in sections 12 through 17. Security teams not responding in the engineering sectors. Emperor Kane rose from his command throne, mandibles clicking furiously. Impossible! Our shields were penetrated during the cycling phase. Supreme General Rex realized, horror dawning. They timed their approach perfectly. Kane activated the ship-wide communication system. All troops, converge on the breach points. Eliminate the intruders at any cost. 10,000 credits to the soldier who brings me a human head. Turning to Rex, the Emperor's compound eyes flashed with murderous intent. This is your failure, General. You assured me their tactics were understood, their capabilities contained.
Emperor,
Save your excuses, Kane snarled. Take your personal guard and hunt down these vermin. I want their leaders captured alive. I will make examples of them before the entire galaxy. As Rex hurried from the command deck, Emperor Kane returned to his tactical displays. The battle outside continued unabated, but with a new urgency as the Allied fleet pressed their advantage, sensing the confusion aboard the Vorak flagship. For the first time in his reign, Kane felt the cold touch of uncertainty. These humans fought like no species he had ever encountered, with a ferocity and determination that bordered on madness. They sacrificed themselves willingly, embraced impossible odds, and somehow continued to advance. Prepare my personal escape craft, he ordered quietly to his adjutant, as a precautionary measure. Deep within the Eternal Conquest, Admiral Hayes led a dwindling group of survivors through the labyrinthine corridors. Of the original 40 boarders, only 23 remained. The others lost to Vorak defenders or separated during the chaotic fighting. Reactor control should be 2 levels down, Hayes said, consulting the schematic they'd assembled from Kalan intelligence and updated during their advance. We need to find an access shaft. Captain Nico, bleeding from a wound in his shoulder but still mobile, pointed down a side corridor. Environmental systems. There should be maintenance ducts that bypass the main decks. The mixed group of Earth, Kalan, Zenturi, and Omega fighters moved cautiously, encountering less resistance in the service areas. The ship's vast size worked to their advantage now. The Vorak defenders couldn't cover every approach. Admiral, one of the Earth operators called softly. I'm picking up a power signature consistent with antimatter containment systems. We're close. Hayes nodded. Prepare the reactor override package. The package was a sophisticated virus, developed by Earth cyber warfare specialists and modified with input from Kalan scientists who understood Vorak computer architecture. Once uploaded to the reactor's control systems, it would initiate a catastrophic containment failure, with a 5-minute delay to allow for potential escape. As they reached a junction in the maintenance tunnels, a blast door suddenly slammed shut, cutting off half their group. Simultaneously, hatches opened in the walls, and Vorak troops poured through. Ambush! Hayes shouted, raising his weapon and firing in a single motion. The confined space erupted in chaos. Energy weapons, kinetic rounds, and the clash of close combat fighting. A Zenturi warrior fell, her silver scales stained dark with blood. 2 Earth operators went down under a wave of Vorak soldiers. Through the melee, Hayes spotted a distinctive figure, a Vorak officer with elaborate cybernetic enhancements and command insignia. Supreme General Rex had joined the hunt personally. Nico, Hayes called. "Take the package and 4 others. Find another route to the reactor. We'll hold them here." Captain Nico hesitated for only a moment before nodding grimly. He collected the data module containing the virus, then gestured to the nearest survivors. 1 Earth operator, 1 Centauri, and 2 Omega infiltrators. They slipped away through a side passage as Hayes and the remaining fighters formed a defensive position. "General Rex," Hayes called out, having recognized the Vorak commander from intelligence briefings. "I am Admiral Marcus Hayes of Earth. Face me directly, if you dare." The Vorak general paused, compound eyes, fixing on Hayes with evident surprise. "The human commander, on a suicide mission? Your species truly is irrational." "We call it courage," Hayes replied, firing a precise burst that dropped 2 Vorak soldiers flanking Rex. "Something your kind seems to lack, hiding behind overwhelming numbers." Rex chittered, a sound that might have been laughter. "Brave words from a dead man." He gestured, and his troops advanced. The fighting intensified, a desperate last stand in the narrow corridor. Hayes and his remaining fighters sold their lives dearly, buying precious minutes for Nico's team to find an alternate route. Meanwhile, Captain Nico led his small group through increasingly narrow maintenance shafts. The Centauri warrior, with her slender build, scouted ahead, while the others followed with the vital payload. "We're directly above the reactor control room," the Centauri reported, peering through a ventilation grill. "I count 8 Vorak technicians. No military personnel." Nico nodded. "They don't expect us to get this far." He turned to the others. "We go in fast. Secure the control interface. Earth operator." "Spencer, sir. Technical Sergeant Spencer." "Spencer, you'll need to upload the package while we hold the room." The 5 fighters positioned themselves around the grill. At Nico's signal, they simultaneously fired through the thin metal, riddling the room below with their first salvo. Then, they dropped through, engaging the surviving Vorak technicians in a brief, brutal firefight. "Clear!" the Omega infiltrator announced as the last technician fell. Spencer rushed to the main control interface, connecting the data module. "Beginning upload. Estimated time to completion, 2 minutes." Nico took up position by the door. 2 minutes we may not have. Be ready for company." As if summoned by his words, alarms blared throughout the section. Heavy footsteps approached from multiple directions. "Upload at 30%, Spencer reported tensely. 1 minute, 30 seconds remaining." The door to the reactor control room buckled under a heavy impact. A second blow dented it further. "Positions," Nico ordered, the 5 defenders spreading out with clear fields of fire. "Remember, we only need to hold until the upload completes." The door exploded inward, and Vorak troops poured through. The defenders opened fire immediately, cutting down the first wave. But more followed, and more behind them. "Upload at 60%, Spencer called. 1 minute remaining." The Centauri warrior fell, her body riddled with plasma burns. One of the Omega infiltrators lost an arm to a Vorak cutting blade, but continued firing with his remaining hand. 80%, Spencer announced. 45 seconds. Nico took a plasma bolt to his leg, the impact spinning him around. He fired as he fell, his shots still finding Vorak targets. The second Omega infiltrator moved to cover him, only to be cut down by concentrated fire. 90%, 30 seconds. Only Spencer remained unwounded, protected behind the control console as he monitored the upload. Nico dragged himself to a defensive position, leaving a trail of violet blood across the floor. "Almost there," Spencer said. 10 seconds. A massive figure appeared in the doorway, Supreme General Rex. His armor scorched and dented from the earlier encounter with Hayes' group. His compound eyes surveyed the carnage, fixing on Spencer behind the console. "Whatever you're attempting, human, it ends now," Rex declared, raising an oversized plasma weapon. "Upload complete," Spencer shouted triumphantly. "Reactor overload initiated. 5 minutes to containment failure." Rex's mandibles clicked in alarm. "Madness!" he fired, the plasma bolt catching Spencer full in the chest, throwing him backward. Nico, summoning his last strength, raised his weapon and fired at the reactor controls themselves, destroying any chance of the Vorak countering the virus. "For Kalen," he whispered. "For Earth." Supreme General Rex backed away, already activating his communication device. "Emperor, the reactor has been compromised. We must evacuate immediately." Throughout the massive flagship, alarm systems blared a distinctive pattern, the call for emergency evacuation. Troops abandoned their posts, rushing for escape pods and shuttle bays. On the command deck, Emperor Kane had already boarded his personal escape craft, surrounded by his elite guards. "Launch!" he commanded, abandoning the thousands of crew members still aboard the dying vessel. In the reactor control room, Captain Nico dragged himself toward Spencer, finding the human still alive but fading quickly. Did we do it?" Spencer asked, blood bubbling from his lips. "We did," Nico confirmed, collapsing beside him. "The ship is doomed. The Emperor is fleeing. It's over." Spencer managed a small smile. "Worth it, to save your people." "Our people," Nico corrected, gripping the human's hand as the ship trembled around them. "From this day forward, our people." Throughout the Kalen system, all eyes turned to the massive Vorak flagship as it shuddered, internal explosions visible through its hull plating. Escape pods jettisoned in all directions, fleeing the imminent destruction, and then, in a blinding flash that momentarily outshone Kalen's sun, the eternal conquest erupted into a cataclysmic fireball. The shockwave rippled outward, washing over nearby ships, and in its wake came something unexpected: silence. The Vorak fleet, witnessing the destruction of their flagship and the death or flight of their emperor, fell into disarray. Some vessels continued fighting, but others began to withdraw, jumping to hyperspace without coordination or unified purpose. Across the combined fleet of Earth, Kalen, Centauri, and Omega ships, a wave of realization spread. Against all odds, they had won. 3 weeks later, representatives from 27 spacefaring civilizations gathered aboard Unity Station, a neutral installation at the edge of the Kalen system. The cavernous assembly hall hummed with anticipation as delegates from worlds that had previously avoided contact now sat side by side. At the center of the gathering, a simple memorial stood, the flags of Earth and Kalen, flanked by those of the Centauri Confederacy and the Omega Coalition, surrounding a holographic flame that represented the lives lost in what was already being called the Battle of Kalen Prime. President Vale, wearing the formal blue robes of her office, newly restored and immaculate, approached the podium. The chamber fell silent. "Delegates of the galaxy," she began, her voice carrying easily through the perfect acoustics. "We gather today to commemorate a victory, but also to recognize a transformation. 3 weeks ago, the Kalen Republic faced extinction at the hands of the Vorak Dominion. Today, the Dominion lies shattered, its emperor in exile, its conquered worlds rising in rebellion." She gestured to Captain Lee of the UES Defiant, who had assumed command of Earth's fleet following Admiral Hayes' sacrifice. This change was made possible by the courage of Earth, a world many of us had dismissed as too volatile, too unpredictable to join galactic society. We were wrong. Murmurs spread through the assembly. Many delegates shifted uncomfortably, aware that their governments had refused to answer Kalen's desperate pleas for help. "The Battle of Kalen Prime cost us dearly," Vale continued. "Over 2,000 Earth personnel, 3,000 Kalen defenders, hundreds of Centauri and Omega warriors, and Admiral Marcus Hayes, whose final act of sacrifice saved not just the Kalen Republic, but perhaps the entire galaxy from the Vorak threat." She paused, her antennae lowering in a gesture of profound respect. "But from this sacrifice comes opportunity. Today, I propose the formation of a new alliance, not just of trade or diplomacy, but of mutual defense, a galactic defense alliance, dedicated to the principle that no peaceful civilization should face aggression alone. The hall erupted in discussion, delegates conferring urgently with their staffs. Ambassador Lyra of the Zenturi rose first. The Zenturi Confederacy supports this proposal, she declared, her silver scales catching the light. We have learned, at great cost, that neutrality in the face of aggression only emboldens tyrants. Minister Cato of the Omega Coalition stood next. The Omega join this alliance willingly. We have witnessed what becomes possible when diverse species unite in common cause. One by one, representatives from other worlds rose to pledge their support, some enthusiastically, others with evident reluctance but clear recognition of the changing galactic reality. When the formal proceedings concluded, President Vale found Captain Lee gazing out a viewport at the stars beyond. "Your thoughts, Captain?" she asked, joining him. "I was thinking about Admiral Hayes," Lee replied. "About what he said before the final battle, that humanity had spent its history asking what makes a civilization worthy of survival." Vale nodded. "And he believed it was the willingness to stand against cruelty." "Yes." Lee turned to face her. "For centuries, Earth isolated itself, building weapons, preparing for threats that never came. We thought we were protecting ourselves, but in the end, our purpose found us, not in self-defense, but in defending others." "A noble purpose," Vale said softly, "and one that will not be forgotten." She gestured to the assembly hall, where delegates continued to mingle, barriers of centuries beginning to dissolve. This is Hayes's legacy, not just victory, but unity. In orbit around Kalen Prime, reconstruction had already begun. Earth vessels worked alongside Kalen ships, clearing debris and rebuilding orbital installations. On the planet's surface, human medical teams continued to treat the injured, while engineering corps helped restore devastated cities. And beyond the Kalen system, word spread across 1,000 worlds, of Earth's emergence, of the Vorak defeat, and of a new alliance that promised a different kind of future. Former Vorak slave worlds declared independence, overthrowing their oppressors. Isolated civilizations reached out, seeking contact and protection. In the corridors of power across the galaxy, leaders contemplated the implications of this new reality, some with hope, others with concern, but all with the certainty that the galaxy had changed forever. For in the darkness of space, a new light had kindled, a beacon of unity against tyranny. Born in the crucible of battle but promising a future of peace. A future where no cry for help would go unanswered. A future secured by sacrifice, maintained by vigilance, and offering hope to all who sought to live free from fear. Earth had answered the call, and in doing so, had called forth something greater than itself.